that to happen, I got to tell you, I think that everyone is going to take a step back and see what are really going to be the issues we want to hear this mayor talk about. Our next mayor is going to have to deal with this economy thing.
Also, though, you have to realize that, you know, gridlock doesn't become as much of an issue if you don't have a job to go to. You know, if you're not sitting in your car, you don't have any place to go, you're thinking, I think I'm more worried about the economy than gridlock right now.
Or if you're not going to stay in Seattle because the jobs are somewhere else.
Exactly. In fact, that was mentioned in the focus groups we did last week. They mentioned, well, the greatest way to take care of gridlock is just for people to leave. And you know what? If we don't have the jobs, they will.
Right.
So it will be interesting and see how it all plays out.
Now in terms of stability and people not wanting dramatic changes in times of in times that are more difficult, who does that benefit? Because you've got Sidran, who's the law and order guy, but he's also the guy who's going to come in and make more sweeping changes. Whereas Nichols is pretty much, you know, Seattle way, business as usual, nicey nice, get along with everybody. So who does that benefit?
I would say it's hard to tell how people look at the stability thing. Stability may not be the characters or the faces you see on the 12th floor, that kind of change. It may simply be the stability that comes with not rocking the boat when it comes to spending projects. We've gone through this exuberance of spending that's come with the Shell administration in terms of libraries and parks and schools. Now, with this alleged recession, the idea becomes, what are we going to do in terms of hunkering down and getting through this? That might be more where people are coming from.
Let's get another caller on the air here real quick. Is this Kathy?
Yes, I have a couple of observations and maybe a question.
Okay, thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
Sure. First of all, I think the gentleman who said that he thinks Mark Sidran had some time to build a different kind of image, I think part of the problem Sidran's had is just that he's had a specific role as city attorney, and so people don't see him outside that role. The question I have, though, has more to do with Greg Nichols and the King County election. The politics of being a council member is really constituent-based. And in Seattle, we've pretty much made a decision that in our city council elections, what you want to be is elected citywide, because you get a much better group of folks working for the city as a whole instead of pitting these districts against one another. And so I'm wondering if you've heard that from anyone else, and if people see Greg Nichols in that way, because I think that is a definite question that I'd want to ask him. You know, does he still favor what Seattle's done for all these years, which is to keep that support for the kind of election for city council and mayor that is citywide?
Okay, thank you.
I know the specific answer to that question is that, I mean, Greg Nichols told our edit board that he's for districting elections, so I don't know.
For the city.
For the city. And he also, I think he spins the whole districting thing in his background from the council as that helps him be a better politician and have to fight tough battles and build consensus and finalities. I mean,
and that's likely to be on the ballot next year also. That we're likely to revisit that.
Yeah, Jay Saucedo's bringing that. Yeah. So.
I think it's also likely that there will be lots of this debate as to what part of the county does Greg bring to the city. I think that will be one. I know that, and a lot of it you have to be careful that isn't just conjecture. The fact that he told your editorial board, I think that's valid. That he is and has been on record for more partisan kind of district elections. The other part about it, and I'm not sure that he wants partisan elections, but he does want district elections.
He wants district. I mean.
He was a strong advocate of keeping the county council partisan seats, which has not been a favorite issue here in Seattle. The other part is that, but there are other things too. I mean, I think there'll be the scare that, oh gosh, he'll be bringing in all of this thing. It'll look like the county. All the county people come over and work in the city.
They want to give the water to the county.
This has been a big thing. The Cedar River watershed. I think it's going to be important to sort of find out what is the fact around Greg as opposed to what is the fiction that we would probably draw as a painting here.
And if you want models of building consensus, county council is not what you would point to generally.
Definitely.
It's true.
Okay. Kathy, you've worked specifically with trying to get underrepresented folks into office.
Yep.
Why are we not seeing more of that in the election that we just had? Why are we not seeing in any of it? I think if you look across the region, we're not seeing a very diverse crop of candidates. Why not?
Well, there's the easy answer, which is to say it's too driven by money, it's too driven by insiders, it's too driven by the actual folks who have the power. That's just not true anymore. The honest truth of why people don't run, well-intended people you and I both know. So they say, why would I? I could give back better, more, still get paid more someplace else, still in many cases have a life of my own. That, you know, public service, particularly being mayor right now, is actually not all that big a thrill when you take a look at the fact that we're going to have a whole lot less money, a whole lot more complaints, a whole lot less time. You still got to answer the phone at 11:30 at night. I think that to the ordinary person, it's not like the process is so daunting or they couldn't win. It's that who needs it.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I don't see, though, how that cuts toward underrepresented, because there are a lot of wealthy white guys who have the same feelings.
No, but except what happens when I speak to particularly a lot of women, people of color, or members of the gay community, what they tell me is that, you know, for all of the grief and aggravation I've got to go through, right now there are a lot of people who want me as a minority or as a woman or as a member of the gay community. They want me as a person that they can showcase as somebody who wants to do something. So if you've got an interest in actually doing more and being more active, the truth is they look at politics as the thing that comes with all the trappings of less fun things.
Yeah, it's pretty distasteful for a lot of people. There's no question.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of disagree. I think that there's a real word out there that you can't beat an incumbent, especially on the city council. And I think districting does get to that. And a lot of people that I've talked to would run if they felt like I could run from my neighborhood. But this citywide thing, it costs too much. And the incumbent has name recognition, and I can't overcome that. Although in this race, I do think you do have some people, like Grant Cogswell, who did step up, and he's sort of an underdog who's running and took it upon himself to run. I think that there are people that are civic-minded that do step up to the plate. So I think people can do it.
It is, but it's unfortunate that Grant runs against, you know, the only African American on the council when we don't have anybody else on the council. And I've listened to Grant in terms of what he's had to say about it, but hey, Dick McIver is actually one of the people that I look at it as somebody who brings a voice that's just not there. And, you know, Grant had my attention.
I mean, obviously Grant writes for strangers, so I'm a little biased, but I mean, I think that argument's a little disingenuous in the sense that, can you give an example where Richard McIver has brought the perspective of the black community to the council? It's not been there. Quite frankly, Nick Licata, I know what you're going to say, but I think when you look at a lot of racial justice issues on the council, Nick Licata has taken the leadership role, and Richard McIver has followed him on it. And I think Grant brings the issue that and Grant has a nice spin on it, which he says he kind of connects the transportation issue to economic alienation issues, and says, you know, transportation is an economic issue.
And all of that is fair. All I can say is that Dick McIver, arrested during the or actually stopped during the WTO, the only guy of color who has taken on racial profiling, who has been out there, you know, talking the talk, walking the walk. This is an honest, credible guy. I think that and he has the public's incentive.
But the racial profiling issue has been brought to the fore by Jim Compton on the Transportation Committee. Yes, Richard McIver has spoken incredibly eloquently about it and brought credibility to the issue, but a lot of people
it's been a late coming issue. And before the WTO, we weren't seeing a lot of that from him.
And you will also find, if you go into particularly the African American community, a lot of people think McIver's a sellout who has no roots in the community.
I mean, we had one of the candidates who came in.
I mean, tell you that from the women particularly believe that this guy is somebody that they can talk to. It's not just members of the African American community. The people that I speak with in the African American community
there's plenty of women
really
on the council.
like
I mean, women
No,
speak.
women particularly think of
Female
McIver
voters.
as representing a very important voice because he is a guy of color. There aren't no other people of color on that council. Now, that is a statement for Seattle when we had, 5 out of the 9 just 5 years ago.
Well, I guess
it's an issue.
And you had herring unless that voice is actually delivering. And like Job said, I do think there are people in the African American community who our papers heard from, and Jerome Wilson, who's an African American who ran, said it as well, that he's not representing that community.
And
so
it's tough to do also because I've seen representatives in the legislature who say this. How can I be an Asian American? Do I have to speak for all Asian American communities? Do I have to speak for the entire African American community? Well, what about the African Americans who live on the East Side or who are more affluent? Or you can't really be the voice for everyone as well.
Well, there's a real schism, and we saw it 2 years ago. We're not going to see it this year because it's not the same dynamic. But you had 3 contested races for city council. In all 3 of those races in the final, you had a person of color running against a white person. In the 37th district, which is South Seattle, the state district, which is the most racially diverse, the people of color won those districts in each case, and in each case, the white person won the overall city, and that was Cheryl Chow, that was Don Mason, that was Charlie Chong. People who were wildly divergent in terms of their politics. What they had in common was that they were not white, and none of them won, even though they all won the 37th. And there's a real
did play
schism.
on that one though. That money was
Well,
the
sure, there's-
opposite. In that case right there was a
Yeah,
tremendous
there are
difference
other
in the
factors,
money.
sure.
But
I-
getting back to, is there any way, how do we grow or bring up more diverse candidates? How do we get folks involved? As you said, the folks who...
Well, Michael Preston's running, and he's black, and he's one of the more.
he's been very active over the last few years while he's been on the school.
Yeah, and he's running
board.
one of the more aggressive campaigns.
So
So.
a 20% difference between he and the incumbent.
Right,
That's
except the
substantial.
incumbent, yeah, the incumbent
That's
didn't get.
substantial.
But Conlon got 44%. I don't think that's great for an incumbent. You know.
It is when
But-
you've got 4 or 5 people running. I mean, I would even be surprised if you would say that it looks good for him to win the general.
Oh, I don't say it looks good, but the
Yeah.
question was, why aren't we seeing more diverse candidates? And I'm saying we have a very credible black man.
Why don't we see any more? Why don't we see others? We have no Hispanic Americans or other.
It's Seattle.
Actually, the school board does have great diversity, which is the place of entry, should be the place of more entry of people
true.
getting into
Yeah.
higher politics. But
And
we've
you
got
know what? We've had
great
more
diversity.
good people running for school board
Yes, I
this
thought
year
so.
than
Those
we
are the
had
best-
running.
those are
than
the
we
best
had
candidates.
Very.
I would
As a group of
have
candidates.
happily taken either of a couple of the school board races. I would have happily had that
Absolutely.
pool for mayor.
And the same thing happened in terms of taking a look at. I think that there's that people are just starting to take a look at what will it take of my life to run. That's the hardest thing, to try and encourage people. Why you're seeing so many journalists, I think, come back is that the journalists are taking a look at what is a good, thoughtful process, and they know their way around the toughness of raising the money, among other things, which is an anathema to all reporters to have to ask them to, ask somebody else for money is just doesn't happen.
Right.
But I do think you will see different kinds of people drawn to politics in terms of, we've seen a lot of the journalists of recent note, they don't have a lot, believe me, they have not money at all, usually.
vouch.
And then second of all, what we will see is people of different economic, Judy Nicastro obviously coming from a different economic background, in addition to bringing a different perspective. I think that's the kind of diversity we're going to see next, is people who come from different cultures. That's
also-
where we need to go next.
There's also the experience issue. It's tough to sort of, as you said, the school board has been the place of entree into the higher political office, but if you don't have that, if you're trying to come in from another way, I'm thinking of the woman who's running for city attorney.
It's Sonia
It's Sonia
Charles.
Charles.
Sonia Charles says that everything you read is strong candidate, only has 6 years experience as an attorney. Well, what does it take? What's the threshold, or what are the qualifications for any elected office? How do you use that to discern who's going to be the better kind of candidate?
That's a good question, because what we look at it with Sonia Charles is that she'd be the first woman ever as city attorney. She'd be the first woman, certainly the first person of color in our city attorney's office, and she's bright and smart and won all kind of awards to boot. The thing that gets me about her is that people don't like to credit the fact that she hasn't been a lawyer for 38 million years. Instead, she's also been running things like the Seattle Housing Coalition, and she's worked for disabled American councils. I mean, this woman's done human things. She's done management things. She's worked in the now Republican U.S. Attorney's Office, and now we take a look at it, and because she doesn't have 30,000 years as a attorney, we think that somehow she can't be as good as Mark Sidran. I think the voters are going to say, yeah, that's the kind of experience we want in our city attorney's office, not this kind of jumping all over the place and seeing how many years you can log as a lawyer, because that's not the only thing that you should be taking a look at in terms
So you
of
think she's going to try?
that.
Because she came out,
Yeah.
4 points behind?
4 points.
Yeah.
She darn near took him
yeah,
in the
very
first one,
strong
very
race.
strong one, and
Yeah.
spent less than half the money that Tom Carr
She was
spent.
not that visible in her campaign. I thought she did surprisingly well.
Well, she got in very late, and the fact is, I think that what will be an issue is obviously Tom Carr, who was running against Sonia Charles, is actually someone who is Greg Nichols, has been Greg Nichols' attorney, and even though he's very clear about saying he never took any money from Greg, the truth is that I think that we may want our city attorney one arm's length removed from our mayor.
It's not even that. The concern I have about Tom Carr, and actually I like a lot of his politics, but he is very tightly tied into the local Democratic Party machine, basically. He's done a lot of local Democratic Party politics that will benefit him in the race, but that makes me hesitant. You don't want somebody in the city attorney's office who's playing politics. That's the part that concerns me. That's one of the things I haven't liked about Cedrin, rather, is quite aside from what I think of his civility laws, he's playing to the grandstands with a lot of what he does, and I don't think that's appropriate for a city attorney.
Why are we not seeing as much interest, I guess, from the public in the city attorney position? We haven't seen very much campaigning for it when it is such a major, it's going to have a major effect on the direction the city goes, and I think sometimes maybe more so than the mayor that's elected. The city attorney is really going to set the agenda. Cedrin was in office for 12 years and really obviously crafted where the city was going in certain respects from a legal standpoint. Why is that not, why don't people care?
I don't think it's as visible a position. I think it's not glamorous. I think, quite frankly, people aren't quite sure what the city attorney does. So it just, I think it's just not a glamorous position. And we've had the same one for 3 terms. So
Unopposed.
Yeah, unopposed. I guess opposed the first time out. And so people aren't just, it's not something that's in the mix for people. That would.
True. Only when things get into trouble do we end up finding out that we've got a city attorney, and I think that that Cedrin. I mean, actually,
when
for
they start
him,
defending unconstitutional ordinances that they put forward, but that's another.
That's a topic for another day. Josh, come on.
I think that what happens is that we do end up with very few opportunities to really see the city attorney front and center. However, I agree that also that in the general we're likely to see more action in terms of the city attorney's race. I hope that it's not just going to be the mayor's race that absorbs all the oxygen in the air. I think that we're going to want to see what else is out there, even in terms of the other city council races, the county council races. I know that we don't have any issues. I think we have very few issues on the ballot right now. The water initiative, I understand, yesterday was taken off the ballot. It's off the ballot. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I think, Seattle is never a dull moment when it comes to elections. It just takes us a while to focus. Last week's disaster, I think, did put some time and energy away from politics and back into people's own personal lives.
Absolutely. That's a great note to end on. That's going to do it for us. I'd like to thank all of my guests here this evening, Kathy Allen, Josh Fite, and Jeff Parrish for joining me. I'm Natasha Smith for Seattle Insight. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 yeah, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave. To the system, I don't wanna be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway. And in the driveway is a nice range. Cause I grind through the climb, I invite pain. You'll never hear me, bitch, nah, I don't complain. Just gotta flip the switch and you can go and obtain anything you want, anything you need. Your mind's got the key ingredient, it's belief. They deceive with the negativity, but I just slide right by that energy. Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
helping out as much as, say, 20 years ago. I mean, I think their hope is to run their businesses so their children can get better professions. So I think definitely family is really important, but that generation passing on of businesses through generations isn't being passed on. And so the danger is in 10, 20 years, when the parents are too old to run their stores, what's going to happen to Little Saigon when their children aren't the business owners anymore. They're off being other type of professions.
What do you see as you look down the road 5 or 10 years from now, or the sort of changes or diversification that you feel need to happen?
Well, I think because the Chinese population, the Filipino and Japanese Americans are so established here, I think they definitely have a strong interest in preserving this area as it is, or maybe as it was, 10 or 15 years ago. But of course, when you get Little Saigon developing as much as it is since the 1980s, I'd like to see just more focus on other populations that are trying to get their foothold in this area, and maybe more support, maybe looking at language services or business development that's going to target those communities that aren't speaking English and that don't have the financial resources of having been here for generations. So I think in that respect, I think International District really needs to become an international district that involves communities, newer communities that have just settled here within the past 10 or 15 years and are continuing to still bring in their families and others from their country.
As people move into the area, is this a place where people would aspire to, or do you think this is a place where new immigrants would just get established and then move on somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. I think this is a place to get established, although more and more it seems like even now this area might be too expensive, and perhaps now they're starting out in White Center, a lot lower income neighborhoods. But I think this is still an entry point. But I think the hope is that they'll move out and establish businesses in the suburbs or the east side. Because if you look at the trend in housing, a lot of Asian Americans are moving out of Seattle and Bellevue, and especially the Vietnamese community is moving towards Renton a lot more. I think the ideal is to be in those neighborhoods that are perhaps not so urban and a lot safer for their families, and possibly closer to where they live, which is now in the Renton area.
And do you have an example of a business or an enterprise here that really is a success story in your own mind, something that you...
Yeah, I would definitely say Thum Nguyen, he owns the Saigon Bistro up on 12th and Jackson. And he started off, came here in the 1980s, established a small restaurant that has since changed over owners. But he opened Saigon Bistro, very successful business, but then also opened up a stall in the Uwajimaya Village, and now is also in the new stadium, football stadium. And I mean, he's a success story not just because of the businesses he's been able to establish, but he's also really been giving back to the community. He'll give a lot of donations, food, financially, a lot of support to people like me who are sort of the newer generation of Vietnamese Americans. Whereas I think others of his age are still kind of fixed in their ideals and they don't really welcome emerging leaders, and I feel like he's a success story because of that, because of his outreach with me and other young leaders and his support of what we're doing and trying to help us achieve what we want to achieve with our community and our personal goals.
Is there anything that you want to say that you think is critical, sort of knowing the slant of what we're doing? Or?
Well, I've really grown to love this community. It's very fascinating to me. It's very different than any community I've ever lived in. I've lived in different places across the country. But one thing I do hope is it's been kind of a struggle trying to get involved with the community because it's been around so long that you've got these activists who are definitely just so entrenched in what they do and have been doing it for years that I just hope that it opens up a little bit more to people who maybe didn't grow up in Seattle, who didn't, say, attend the University of Washington, or who maybe, newer immigrants. But I think that needs to happen in order to go further with, I think we all share the same goal in the end of improving this area and keeping it close and unified.
And is there, as you were talking, I was just thinking in terms of Bob, truly being an elder, is there that kind of tension that in an Asian community that sort of those voices need to be respected, or do you feel that's a younger voice is as valid and the older generation just needs to hear what?
I think there is a tension, although I think it's more subtle. I don't think Uncle Bob necessarily might agree that there is a tension, but I think it's a struggle to get our voices heard, being not part of the 70s movement in Seattle. I think people of his generation, activists, kind of assume that people care about the issues they're working on, and in the end it's still a lot of education, even for me and for the newcomers too, that we didn't grow up with that same experience. And part of my mission working at the International Examiner is to get people who aren't already interested in what some of the issues are. And so I think there's an assumption that we all care about the same thing. Well, first of all, that we actually care, and I don't think we should assume that. I think part of our mission right now is to get more people to care about what we're working on.
Okay. Do you think the city's been good to the International District? I mean, do you have enough of a history to?
Well, I actually did some fundraising at the museum down here, and I think there's been enough activism on the part of the International District agencies and businesses that we've definitely made our needs heard by the city. And I would say overall the city has been respectful of some of the things that we need, just financially and resources. But I do think if you look at some of the development and improvements in the past few years that I've been in the ID, I haven't really seen that much. So I think there's definitely projects that they've invested their time and energy with, but it seems like a constant struggle for the city to remember that we still have a lot of things we have to work on in this district, and that it's still important, even though we have new offices like the Paul Allen buildings, that we're still struggling as a community economically and just physically.
Okay. Good. Okay. Great. Where's this restaurant close by that you mentioned?
Yeah, there's a.
You ready, Matt?
Action! Action!
Yeah. How'd you? Quiet home?
The capital.
Yeah. How's business?
Lately, to be slow.
Yeah.
We are okay.
Been slow. I went to Ujima.
Not okay today, but yesterday and before yesterday, slow.
Why do you think it's been slow?
I don't know. There are so many factors.
Yeah.
I think that maybe sauce fails.
Yeah, I heard that people seem to be worried about coming to International District.
Yeah.
That surprises me. Really surprising. Do you know anybody who's been back to Vietnam recently?
Yeah, I know one or two of them.
Are they pretty worried too?
Yeah. But I think that is now since that I think the condition is becoming a little bit better now.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe less scary now.
Yeah. How about your new business in the football stadium?
Yeah,
Is it doing okay?
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, I've been pretty busy at the paper, and we're having a dinner next month.
But the dinner is kind of slow. It's too slow.
Oh yeah. But the examiner's having a
You have a chance to talk to Tao?